Thank you, everyone who is here tonight. Thank you to the Morris Museum of Art and their entire staff for putting this together and for hosting this beautiful exhibition of my work. Thank you to Jerald Melberg Gallery for your support and mentorship and friendship in representing my work for the past 18 years. Unfortunately, Jerald and his wife, Mary Melberg, are unable to make it tonight. They sent their apologies, but they thank you all for being a part of this. Also, I want to thank the many lenders to the exhibition. The show would not be as strong without the addition of these works. So thank you for sharing your personal paintings with this museum's audience. Thank you to my mom and dad who are here tonight. Thank you for your love and support. And most importantly, thank you to my wife, Lauren, for your encouragement and inspiration. I would not be here without you. So I'm going to give you a little background information about myself to explain how I got here and what has influenced my work along the way. Hopefully this won't be too dry, but I'll try to make it interesting, and then we can have a really fun Q&A at the end if that works. I'm from Leesville, South Carolina, which is just northeast of here, about a 45-minute drive on I-20. Exit 44 to be exact. That little red dot there helps you out. I was born in 1979 and lived in my childhood home until I left for college in 1997. The home that I grew up in is a beautiful, modest ranch, which is situated on a lovely piece of farmland. My grandfather and my father farmed this land, and as a child, I would help whenever possible. I learned a great deal about hard work from these times and also about appreciating the simpler things in life. My parents both worked in the local textile mill called J.B. Martin, or as it was also called, J.B. Martin, as it was French, which is still operating today, surprisingly. And they both worked a staggered shift schedule. Dad worked second shift, so 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., and Mom worked the third shift, so 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., if I remember correctly. So during the week, they really didn't see each other very much, and I'm sure this was a difficult schedule for them to work with two children. Fortunately, my grandparents were a short walk away through one of the farm fields, and my brother and I spent much time there. My grandfather spent a great deal of time talking with us about earth, nature, and animals. There was always a lesson to be learned through his stories, much like a parable. He also had a barn full of strange items that he had collected through the years. These items ranged from the old tools to old toys, items with interesting advertising, and pieces of broken machinery. Everything seemed to have an important place and purpose. There were not many other kids that lived in the rural area in which we were raised, and since my parents worked difficult hours, doing extracurricular activities such as Cub Scouts and Little League sports were not really an option. So to pass the time and be a kid, we spent many hours playing in the fields, in the woods, the old barn, making drawings, and playing games. Drawing was an early passion of mine, and I spent a lot of time drawing cartoon characters and superheroes, much like any young child at that age. And my teacher started to notice that I had some proficiency in this area, and they encouraged me to keep working. Throughout my high school, I thought that I wanted to either be a comic book illustrator or an art teacher. I loved drawing comics, so that seemed natural. I'd gone to STAD, actually, to check out one of their programs. They had a nice sequential art program. But I had been turned on to art ed through a program at my high school called Teacher Cadets. However, that all changed when, in an art class, I received a copy of Scholastic Arts. And this magazine had an article about a Norwegian artist named Edvard Munch. This is a photo of my Scholastic Arts magazine from high school. I still have this. Very important to me. I fell in love with his paintings and how he used this expressive artwork to tell a story about his life, his love, and his losses. I purchased a book of Munch at a bookstore around the same time, and read it over and over again, memorizing every detail of his work. Also, around the same time, there was a young art teacher that started teaching at my high school, and he had taken an interest in my direction. He tried to be a good influence in where I was going. He told me that there was an exhibition of prints, surprisingly, at the Columbia Museum of Art, and I should go. I knew nothing about art museums at the time, so he offered to meet me at my place of work, which is a local fast food restaurant called Rush's. Many of you may have been to a Rush's. And anyway, we met there and we rode together. I'm sure this is not allowed today anymore, but that small gesture made a huge impact. At the museum, I saw many works that I had only seen reproduced in books. I also viewed other works in the museum's collection and lost myself reading all of the wall labels. This was my first time in an art museum, and I was hooked. We were only there for an hour or so, but I made a point to come back another day by myself. That time I stayed until the museum closed. I took a sketchbook with me and carefully took notes and made little drawings of my favorite parts of these powerful works by Edvard Munch. This teacher was also concerned with where I was going to go to college. No one in my family had been to college at this time, so this was something that was new to me and my family, and I was not sure how to go about it all. I knew that I could only go to a school within the state of South Carolina, so he had told me of a few schools I should consider. Winthrop University was one of them, and as it turned out, Winthrop was offering a portfolio day for prospective students in the near future. He encouraged me to go check out the school and offered to drive me. So on a Friday, we met at the same fast food restaurant, and he drove with me to Winthrop University. Again, I'm sure it's not allowed today, but that was a huge thing that influenced me. I was able to meet with the teachers, discuss the department, and I was able to tour the department, and I was also able to take a small workshop class while I was there. Needless to say, I was impressed and decided this is where I wanted to go. Fortunately, when I applied, I was accepted, and my mom did what she could to help me get enrolled. Thanks, Mom. My original goal was to study art education, but that quickly changed. I fell in love with the university. This old building and the art department were beautiful. Art students had 24-hour access to the studios, and I took full advantage of that. I stayed there all times, day and night, drawing and later painting. Winthrop University also has a beautiful art gallery on campus that is actually housed in what was an old Carnegie library. Tom Stanley was the director of the gallery at the time, and I noticed that he had a few students that had worked for him in the gallery, installing shows, painting walls, and painting pedestals. I really wanted to work in the gallery with Tom, so I told him that if he needed help, I would love to work with him. I worked for him until I graduated, and even after that for one additional semester. Tom taught me a lot about the display of artwork and its proper presentation. Tom was also a working artist, and he had his studio in the same building as other student studios. I would walk past his door late at night, and he would be in there working, jazz music turned up, playing really loud, and he was just making his art, which are beautiful paintings. I learned a lot about how to be a working artist from him and how to present and promote the arts. We actually borrowed a Benny Andrews from the Morris Museum of Art for one of our more large-scale exhibitions at Winthrop University. So that was really cool. Thanks for learning that. Tom and I are still great friends, by the way, so I cherish him and all he's done through the years. So while I was at Winthrop in my early years, I was also interested in the work of Munch. I was trying to work in a very expressive way. I was making very loose marks, painting with thick impasto. I was applying paint with palette knives and plastic spoons, anything that would give me an interesting, expressive mark. I was initially attracted to the painting of the figure, so I was trying to paint narrative compositions using friends from school. However, I was becoming more and more drawn towards compositions that lacked the figure. I would see something like a chair position outside of the printmaking studio near the phone that was attached to the wall. The chair would be empty. And I noticed that it held a certain drama. It created a more interesting story than someone sitting in the chair talking on the phone. I like to use the example of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'm much more interested in an image of a PB&J sandwich on a plate with a bite taken out than an image of someone biting into a PB&J. Around this time, one of my teachers introduced me to the work of another Norwegian painter, a contemporary artist named Odd Nerdrum. I was completely blown away. There's this artist that is painting like Rembrandt, and he lives and works today. I couldn't believe it. I bought whatever books I could find on Nerdrum, and I learned as much as possible about his work and his techniques. I saw a few simple object paintings of Nerdrum, and it reminded me of objects that were in my grandfather's barn. Nerdrum painted these objects in such a dramatic way that it seemed to give the objects the feeling of a religious relic. My grandfather had passed away by this time, and when I would visit my parents, I would often go down to my grandparents' house and barn and would find a wonderful treasure I wanted to bring back to the studio with me to paint. There was a small group of student artists that I'd formed a club at Winthrop. We called ourselves the Union of Student Artists, or USA for short. We would meet and discuss opportunities in the area, local juried exhibitions that you should apply to, things like that, exhibitions to see. And they were planning a trip to New York City to go to the museums. I'd never been outside of the Carolinas or Georgia, so this was something new to me, and I definitely wanted to experience it. Odd Nerdrum showed his work at Forum Gallery in New York City, and I desperately wanted to go to Forum to see a painting by Nerdrum in the flesh. I knew that there was something about seeing one that would give me some information that I needed to influence and help enhance my artwork. So when in New York City with the USA trip, I made a pilgrimage to see a Nerdrum painting at Forum Gallery. However, what I experienced was something that I never expected. In the gallery, they were installing the paintings of an artist by the name of Stephen Brown. And Stephen was actually in the gallery applying a final coat of varnish to his works. Stephen spent a few moments chatting with me and invited me later back to the reception, which was that evening. The paintings were small, single object paintings, and except for a few figurative works. They had these luscious surfaces, very beautifully glazed, and a light quality that just seemed like the paintings were glowing from within. Immediately, I knew this was important. There was no need for me to try to paint in some gimmicky way any longer and force myself to make expressive marks. The marks I would make would be personal to me and no one else. I just needed to slow down, observe, and capture what was in front of me. These images I'm showing you are from a catalog from that show at Forum Gallery that they had produced of Stephen's work, and he gave this to me that night, and I still cherish it greatly. He unfortunately passed away in 2009, but I have spoken with his widow a few times and told her how much this really impacted my work, this moment. When I returned to Winthrop after that trip, I threw away all of those plastic spoons and bought a small kit of oil paints. Winthrop did not teach oil painting and actually encouraged the use of acrylic paints instead. However, I had grown to dislike the look and feel of acrylic paints in my own work, so I wanted to learn oil painting. I bought this small set of oil colors one summer between semesters and taught myself how to use them best I could. And as a result, I applied for the 2001 South Carolina State Triennial Exhibition that was going to be at South Carolina State Museum. And I was accepted. I was thrilled. This was a major opportunity that my teachers were also applying to, and I was selected instead. Now, it was a very humbling thing for me, but I was honored. The paintings that I exhibited were created using objects to convey a narrative that's centered around Dante's Inferno. These are a few images of some of those paintings of mine at that time. They are scanned from old slides, so the quality isn't the best, but you can kind of get a sense of this direction. And this was one of the paintings in the Triennial exhibition. Upon graduating from Winthrop, Tom Stanley told me that the department would like to hire me on for an additional semester. Winthrop is fully accredited in the arts with an organization called NASAD, and there's an accreditation process, a reaccreditation process that you have to go through every so many years, and the department was up for that once again. So they asked me to stay on for another semester to help put together exhibitions that would highlight different disciplines within the department. But after that, I would no longer have a job on campus, unfortunately. So while I had some downtime from that job, I went about trying to meet a few other people that might work in the arts that could help me get a job. I had reached out to the head of design and installation at the Mint Museum of Art in Charlotte, North Carolina. His name is Kurt Warnke. And Kurt told me that he did not have a job he could offer me, but he would like to still meet. So I came and met with him one day in his office, and we chatted. He was kind of sizing me up, I could tell. He said that there's a lot of businesses and private collectors that actually have collections in the Charlotte area, and they call him often because they would like to have works installed in their homes or their businesses, and he would like to have someone he could refer. So I did that a few times for him as a contractor on my own, until he called me one day and said that Jerald Melberg Gallery was looking for an art handler. So I reached out to Jerald, and he was looking for someone. I started working with him in May of 2002, part-time, and that job quickly became a full-time position. I worked with him until 2017. My role at Jerald Melberg Gallery was very diverse. Like staff at many small businesses, I was responsible for the design and installation of the exhibitions. I also delivered and installed artworks to clients' homes. I worked closely with frame shops and conservators. I was responsible for photographing every work of art that came into inventory. Here's a few examples of some of the shows. This was a Chuck Close show, which was an honor to work on, and a large Robert Motherwell exhibition. The gallery also participated in many art fairs around the U.S. So I was often preparing for these works and traveling with Jerald to work the booth to promote these artworks. Here's a few examples of our booths. Brian Rutenberg painting back there. You might recognize his work. Well, Jerald was also very encouraging of my artwork, and he started to exhibit my paintings in 2006. It was a huge honor to have my artwork hang on his walls alongside many of the heroes of mine. The more I exhibited my work, the more I wanted to paint. Working full-time and traveling for work was very tricky, but I rented a small studio space outside of my house and painted late into the evenings and on the weekends. I made it work, but it was a tough schedule to keep. This was a small studio space I had rented in one building, and then as I started to kind of outgrow it, I got a much larger space that was lovely. These are a few paintings I made at that time. here. You probably saw this on one of the easels. That's just a detail. So around this time, a fine art logistics company based out of New York was interested in establishing a new office in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'd come to their attention and they contacted me regarding this opportunity. I was promised many things to make this job all more enticing. The most enticing thing was that I would work fewer hours. I would just be managing clients and staff, and I would be able to focus more on my painting career. However, nothing could have been further from the truth. I worked for more hours for this company than I ever did with Jerald. And I was not the office guy, I was a truck driver. My biggest regret in life is leaving that amazing job that I had with Jerald for this logistics company. However, Jerald and I, we always stayed friends, and he encouraged me in any direction I would take, which led me to a tragic turning point in my life. I had just delivered an exhibition to a museum in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and I was returning to Charlotte. The large truck was empty, and it was raining very badly, and the roads were very slick. There was a car in front of me that was barely moving, did not have its lights on, and I saw it when it was too close to stop easily under the conditions. So I had to swerve the truck to miss the car, which caused the truck to spin out of control and flip over into the median. I could have and probably should have died. Fortunately, I was fine. No one was hurt. There was no collision. No art was damaged. Everything was okay. The company that employed me was not helpful, and I was essentially stranded late on a Friday night, middle of wherever I was, South Carolina. There was no way for me to get home. No Uber, no Lyft, no taxi. Fortunately, my wife, girlfriend at the time, was able to send someone to get me. And while waiting there on the side of the road, standing in the pouring rain, looking at that truck flipped over, I knew that everything was about to change again. I realized how short and precious life truly is. No more was I going to waste my time and pass on the things that I wanted to do. Once I returned home, I set about starting my own business, getting an LLC, getting insurance, getting a business bank account, and setting up QuickBooks. I was going to work as an independent contractor offering fine art services. I left that other company that I'd worked for 2 years, and on the last day I worked there, I already had multiple clients lined up for weeks. Another part of the reason why I left that company is because I had received notification that I was awarded a residency at the McCall Center of Art and Innovation in Charlotte, North Carolina. The McCall Center is housed in an old church on the north side of town, and it hosts many well-known artists for several months-long residencies. It's well-equipped and very well-respected. I knew that there was no way that I could work for someone else and take full advantage of this amazing opportunity. While at the McCall Center, I started working on a series of small paintings that focused on single objects. I called the series Object as Portrait. My inspiration was the power that the object could hold, representing someone that we all know. Think of a special person in your life, a parent perhaps, and how that person is always connected to some object or thing. Perhaps there's a special coffee mug that can be their portrait, just as easily as a traditional portrait of someone's face. And I'll just show you. These are a few paintings from that series here with these bars of soap. Sweetheart soap and this twin of ivory. When I completed this residency, Jerald had an exhibition of these works from this period, as well as other paintings that I had made where I continued the series. And I was starting to get more attention. And I was always trying to find a way that I could spend more time in the studio. My wife and I had just moved into a new house, And the house had an attached carport garage that had never been finished on the inside. I was able to locate a fabulous contractor who had a great eye for design and who was able to convert this empty space into a studio and attach it to the house. It's actually part of the house now. When the construction was finished, I took a month of time from booking installation clients just to paint. So the entire month of July was going to be my month to paint. However, I spent a great deal of time booking clients for August. And again, I knew a change was coming. I was telling Lauren that I don't know if I could go back to installing art like I once was. I kept one client and only one client because they were respectful enough to work with. But I knew that I was going to have to transition away. Fortunately, Jerald Melberg Gallery had a few clients that had expressed interest in commissioned paintings from me. My wife convinced me that I needed to take the jump and just make the paintings. Stop booking the installation jobs that I had. If I make the commissioned painting, I will get paid. And then I can make another painting and another painting. It was time to make the leap. And if not now, then when? One of the paintings here in your gallery right now is actually from that commission. And another painting that I was commissioned was a series of paintings for a children's book titled The Sun Comes Up. The author, I'd known him from my time working with Jerald. He worked as an architect / designer with a couple of clients, and he had bought a painting of mine in the past, and he enjoyed my work, and he often said he wanted to get another painting in some way from me. Well, this man, he had retired. Years had passed since I'd last seen him. He had retired in this time and was traveling across the Atlantic Ocean with a colleague of his that somehow he had become connected to, and they were delivering a very fancy catamaran across the Atlantic from France to Annapolis, I think is where they landed. And while he was on the ship at night doing his night watch, he had come up with this idea for this children's book where there was a little boy that was a sailor and he is chasing the sun, playing a game. And as the sun sets, the boy is sad and the sun says, oh, well, I'm coming up tomorrow and we'll do it all over again. He had seen this piece of marketing material that the book would, this marketing material like flipped or folded in a way that it narrated a story on its own and came back to the beginning. So anyway, this is the first painting from that series. Forgot one minor detail. He wanted me to use toys from his childhood. So that's his teddy bear, his pond boat, his globe, his Cecil the seasick sea serpent, and his flipper, things like that. So, and this was supposed to kind of narrate this story of traveling. So he and I had to go back and forth a lot to come up with how we wanted to do this. But in the first painting that you just saw, everything was sort of inanimate, and then they become animated as the sun is rising there in the east, and the shadows are being cast that way. And then it's going to the west, and the shadows are being cast that way. And then everything is now back to being toys on a desk. And you can see that the shadows again have changed. The flag in the background was attached to the ship as he crossed the Atlantic. He had that, so I thought that would be a fun thing to have in the background. And the red dots connect the place of departure with the place of arrival. This was a fun project to work on. And there is a book that exists. I forgot to bring a copy for you all to see, but I gave one to the Morris in case anyone wants to see it. You can see it that way. But this is, I had to make a mock-up to show him the studies at one point and how they would function. So just so you all can see, this is how the book functions. So it opens, you see painting 2, It opens again. You see painting 3 and how everything kind of moves. And then it opens once again, and you see painting 4. And then it opens once again, and you're back at the beginning. And that, kind of loops that way. It was a fun project. This was a daunting task, as you could probably imagine, but I was excited for this opportunity. And this afforded me the chance to stay in the studio longer and continue to build my career while also focusing on other works at the same time. Since then, I've been fully devoted to my studio work, and I've had several other commissions and exhibition opportunities such as this, the Morris. Jerald Melberg Gallery closed an exhibition of recent work in May, which also featured the release of that children's book. It was a huge success and received great attention in the press. This brings us up to now. Currently, I'm working on a commissioned painting for the cover of a book that an author is writing about her mother. The painting that I'm making is an image of the author's late mother's antique charm bracelet. So again, object as portrait. So that concludes that part, but I just put together a few images that I could share with you. Some are here in the gallery, obviously, and some are not. I enjoy a lot finding these old objects that I want to paint and creating this narrative composition with them in a way. And I like subtlety, so a lot of it can be rather, you might miss some of it sometimes, but there's this old chest that it's on, as you can see, and the padlock is missing. But I love the advertising graphic design on this this box with the magic 8-ball. And I used it again with another larger painting, this time with the lock on the chest, and there's a key hovering above. And there you can kind of see a detail with the lock. I know we were chatting earlier about some of the old video game images. So this was a wonderful series I did for Art Miami in 2022, I think, for Jerald Melberg Gallery, whenever they go down and do Art Miami during Art Basel. So these were some great retro gaming controllers. And I think this was maybe part of that show. Again, I found this wonderful old box of chess pieces in an antique store. And the box was so just wild because of, it was beautiful for one thing, but the text on the box, it just seems so profound in its own way. A complete set of chess. Yeah, and it says the pieces are made in 2 colors equally divided, which is kind of, got its own sort of idea of race relations and equality with a lot of things. So I thought it was like this wonderful way to kind of make its own statement with this simple object. Yeah. Yeah, and then this was a great little yarn container for sewing, and the design just held my attention so much, with this woman knitting on one side, and on the other side there's a cat playing with her ball of yarn. So I had to paint both sides of this, and included it in the painting you have here in the gallery called Mischief, this wonderful mischievous cat figurine. It reminds me of something my grandmother had in one of her little rooms at their house. Gypsy Queen is here in the gallery. And of course, there's Song of Sixpence. This painting started with the pie, the toy pie. We were traveling in Brevard, North Carolina, and an antique store caught my eye, and there was this toy pie that's much like a Jack-in-the-Box. You push the cherry down on the top, the birds go inside, and then as you crank it, plays a little song. At some point it triggers and the birds pop out. And I thought it was wonderful because one of the birds on the actual toys broken and missing. And I knew I wanted to paint the objects. A lot of times I'll buy these things and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, but I know I'm going to do something one day. And I lived with the studio for a while. And I kept realizing that I needed a bird in flight, a blackbird in flight, to kind of connect it together. And I found this wonderful taxidermy bird with someone in the UK, and purchased it. And like a month later, it showed up and put together this wonderful composition. Yeah. This is another one of the retro gaming pieces I put together, but this one I thought I would try something different and have something on the screen. And this was a still image from one of my favorite games as a child that was like sort of iconic, and it also became a bit of a self-portrait because, you know, I felt like this at one point of my life where I was, you know, on a shipwreck myself, holding on. And I've painted my bird again recently. This painting's titled Pendulum, and I just wanted the power of the crow with this trinket. It has stolen, or it's bringing to you. It's a message. It's so many things you could kind of read a lot into. And this was an image of our wedding cake with the wedding cake topper. But anyway, that is the presentation I have for tonight. I hope it was interesting and